After unfortunately having no opportunity to upload yesterday, I'm back today to bring you guys my review of the last couple of days of action from the second week of Overwatch League's third stage. This is made a little easier by how one-sided the results have been on the whole, with few truly competitive series. So let's discuss what happened and see how my last few predictions fared before looking ahead to the games later on today. Friday began with the intriguing matchup of the momentum-gaining Paris Eternal, who had dominated their Week 1 fixtures, going up against the New York Excelsior, who had a much more mixed performance of their own. This match, therefore, would be critical in determining these teams' true levels of strength at this early stage, especially after the Shock's upset loss to Houston the day prior. The first map on the pool was perhaps the best in the series, as it flipped back and forth, first in the favour of Paris, whose Maygoats comp on Village proved too strong for New York to handle, who were consistently decimated by Blizzard. However, despite putting up a decent fight, simply the Excelsior was stronger than the Eternal in the Goats 3-3 mirror, which allowed them to take the next two rounds, win the map, and take an early lead in the series. Following this close, competitive map were two that were completely the opposite, as New York dominated both Volskaya and Umbani. They completed both maps with very good time banks of their own, before stalling their opponents' replies, who just couldn't seem to get going. Sabiolbi brought out Sombra again, first in a triple DPS comp, which then transitioned to Sombra Goats. Again, it didn't take over the game, as he still looks to improve his play on the hero, but his hacks and EMPs found enough success to allow Mano, backed up by Libero's Brig, to really stamp his authority, as throughout the series he led the line viciously in a one-sided duel against Benbest, highlighted by a number of Earth Shatters he connected. It wasn't that Paris were playing particularly badly, and there were moments including on the final map where their improving play on Goats 3-3 was showcased. The final map Dorado went down to the final teamfight, with the Eternal being helped with the late substitution of Flower for the Excelsior, as he took over the Sombra role, and played rather similarly to the SBB in his first series against Houston. In the end, armed with the ultimate advantage, Paris did just enough to win the final teamfight and pick up a consolation map in their 3-1 defeat. Again, this is another result that seems to steady the New York ship as their progression on Sombra Goats continues. For Paris, this series made clear that whilst they are still improving this stage, and will be able to take wins off the bottom half of the table, right now they pose no real threat to those competing at the top. Following this series was a match between the Toronto Defiant and London Spitfire, that pitted one roster still trying to gel together, with another that was facing the reality of being far off those out in front. The first round was peculiar, as despite taking the first round on Ilios, Lighthouse, London was simply getting outplayed by Toronto, whose ultimate usage was just better in the crucial teamfights, giving them the early 1-0 map lead. However, by comparison, Volskaya wasn't even close, as a Spitfire efficiently managed point presence to take down a Defiant's triple DPS attack, before brushing aside the Sombra Goats defense to level up the series with ease. Returning on Hollywood, Gods and Ivy played really well to help their team complete the map, but they can only manage to do this in overtime in response to a very impressive attack from London. And with their extra attack, again it was their tank line of Fury, Prophet and Jester that got them over the line to take a 2-1 lead in the series. Gibraltar will be the fourth map, and it ended up becoming a Goliath battle between Fury's Diva and the subbed-in Yakpun's Reinhardt. The pair kept upping each other throughout the map that was rather competitive throughout, as they exchanged grav-eats and massive shatters. Alas, with London completing the map first, it was going to be a tough hill to climb, with Ivy having his grav-eaten in the last teamfight proved to be the nail in the coffin, as the Spitfire came out in the end, just winning the map and thus the series 3-1. Again, these losses continue to be growing pains for Toronto with their new roster, who are making progress, but now potentially have a main tank dilemma between Sharek and Yakpun. Meanwhile, London again showed their tank line quality, but given how competitive this series ended up being, against at best a low mid-table side, it highlights how far off the top they are, even more. The Boston Uprising played the Houston Outlaws in the third match of Friday, and to be perfectly honest, this series summed up precisely where the teams stand, after completely opposite runs of form and momentum lately. I don't think I need to go into too much detail, as the Outlaws once again dominated and decimated Boston with their triple DPS and Sombra Goats comps, but especially on their attacks were deadly, finding the excellent play from the team all round, but especially from Linksa and Muma. The problem for the Uprising was that there were moments throughout where you could see their potential and openings from which they could potentially get back into the series, but there just seemed to be some coordination and communication issues between the front and back lines, with Fusions and RCK often starting fights, getting kills or targets low, but then received no follow-up assistance and ended up being split up and eliminated themselves. Houston locked up the 4-0 win after a very impressive Havana hold, before an excellently deployed Bastion comp with Symmetra and Sombra that was a nightmare to defend against and ripped Boston to shreds, as both sides continued their opposite spells with momentum and progression. Friday closed with the LA Gladiators versus the Philadelphia Fusion, and given their recent results, it looked like the Gladiators were in for another blowout victory. In fairness to Philly though, they came out swinging, putting up a solid fight on Oasis, despite eventually losing the map. What was interesting to see was that the Fusion, as we are seeing throughout the league, specifically began rotating in some triple DPS and Sombra Goat rollouts alongside their traditional Goats, which at times trips up the Gladiators. The problem for Philadelphia was that these comps still looked a little rough around the edges, not fully perfected, so in spite of some nice overall play, particularly from Poco and Neptuno, the quality of LA was able to get them over the line, as shown by the defensively lacking 6-5 scoreline on Volskaya, but just fell in the local team's favour. The following two maps saw the Fusion put in much better defensive displays on Eichenwald and Dorado, as they halted the Gladiators to just before the end of the second section, with particular focus on eliminating Decay, who when alive was the star behind his team's success and progression. However, their attacks had lost their bite from the assault map earlier, as they were feebly held on Eichenwald, which confirmed their series defeat, before just in overtime finishing the first section of Dorado that gave them just enough of momentum to go on and win a consolation map in their 3-1 series loss. For LA, it was another solid and necessary win to keep them near the top of the teams in the league, but it did show what can happen if they consistently lose Decay in teamfights, which might become a point of focus for opponents moving forward. Philly, meanwhile, put in a much better display and defeat, but they now need to utilise it and continue to develop their alternate comps to avoid slipping into the large pit of teams vying for the lower seeds in the play-in bracket just below them. I'd like to say that yesterday saw a great amount of competitive action that kept us glued to our screens in eager anticipation and excitement. But I'd be lying, as despite some moments of genuine competitiveness, Saturday ended up just being one of those days where the matches were very one-sided, with a number of blowouts, so for a couple, I won't spend too much time on them. One of those being the Washington Justice against the Hangzhou Spark, in a series that demonstrated why they are at opposite ends of the league right now. As usual, the Justice gave us the occasional moment of intrigue, particularly finding success defensively, but this is largely down to one of their major weaknesses, being their ability to engage, and the execution of them, with Janus often getting split up and killed early, like Addo. This means their attacks are often messy and unsuccessful, as shown by the second map Paris, in which despite the team being in a great position, they drew after a terrible attack of point B. Gushui once again was an alpha in this series, but it was his wingman Adora who I have to applaud after breaking Arc throughout the series. On what I think was 4 or 5 occasions, he stunned Arc in his sound barrier animation, nullifying it, and thus leading to the Justice's collapse, as the series ended predictably 3-0 in the Sparks' favour. The Seoul Dynasty then took on the Atlanta Reign in the second match of the day, and what I hoped would be the best match of the day, with both teams playing very well so far this stage. Unfortunately again, expectations were dashed aside, as Seoul, fielding their more passive lineup, took control of the affair, which to their credit was thanks to a great strategy employed by Zumba and Ryu Jae-hong, of focusing down Dogman at the beginning of each teamfight, which gave the Dynasty free reign on the reign, bringing them success. This pair, alongside Marvel, were outstanding throughout, as Seoul once again were clinical, with excellent use of ultimates, and despite their best efforts with Atlanta, and their main man Dako, who at points posed significant threats, almost taking a couple of rounds and maps, they were consistently let down by their ultimate usage that saw little overall value, with support ults especially, often too late or inadequately used to compound the Dynasty's advantage further, on course to their 4-0 win in the series. Seoul now have started off this stage fantastically, and have an excellent opportunity to show that they're the real deal as they face a reeling San Francisco shock side in the game of the week tomorrow. Atlanta meanwhile are probably in a slump after 4 losses on the trot, mainly due to the level of opposition they've been facing, and they need a win in some easier series coming up, or risk having this great potential run of play be wasted on losses. When the Dallas Fuel went up against the Vancouver Titans, there only looked to be one outcome, and unsurprisingly it came through in another blowout 4-0 result. Dallas did put in some nice rounds on attack on both Volskaya and Eichenwald, but at no point did the Titans look ever seriously threatened, as shown by them bringing out their tomfoolery DPS comps, which resulted in my highlight of the series from Bumper, as on Widow he was picked up a double headshot flick as he grappled himself into the water, the ultimate disrespect. Bumper was fantastic elsewhere and continually got the better of OGE with his shatters, particularly in the clutch, crucial teamfights, which has become a signature feature of Vancouver this season. They continue their dominant, undefeated regular season streak. At this point, meanwhile, it does look like Dallas has just run out of fuel, as despite the quality that we know they have on their side, they just look a little stagnant and underwhelming, so they might want to mix things up soon, or risk falling into the pit of despair further down the league standings. Completing the day was the most competitive series of the day, as the Guangzhou Charge played the LA Valiant, with both sides having shown some recent signs of improvement. The first round was rather close, with the Charge getting the better of the early engagements, but gradually, the tank line of the Valiant began to take over, with good displays from Fact Fiction and KSF, but especially Space, who was outstanding both early on and throughout the series, as they helped their side pick up 2 rounds and take a 1-0 lead in the series. Horizon Lunar Colony was a map that followed, and once again it was another tight affair, but this time it was behind Hot Bazaria and Eileen Sombra that Guangzhou looked much more clinical and the dominant side, utilising a faster first map completion to better LA's second attack and tie the series at halftime. This series was really shaping up in a way that benefited the team that executed their attacks more cleanly, as returning on Numbane, the Valiant finished the map quickly, having some nice kills from Agilities and Karif, who himself had an excellent series. And as the charge could only finish in overtime, the Valiant took full advantage, winning the map on the back of a space Gravite. Havana saw Eileen again cause issues with his Sombra, once again thanks to space and fact fiction. LA were able to squeeze the card just to the final section, which we've seen as quite a feat to accomplish on this map. This was highlighted by the Valiant holding the charge to the second section and winning the map after space again came up with an early Diva Bomb kill on Hotba that gave LA the 3-1 victory, continuing their solid start to the stage as the Guangzhou charge continues to stumble along near the bottom of the pack. These last 2 days were amazing for my predictions, as I finished with a perfect 8 out of 8 record, even nailing the scoreline in a couple of series. Toronto's 3-1 loss to London, and extraordinarily the Sparks 3-0 win against Washington. Don't ask what made me think they'd draw, but hey, it happened. On the whole, with every other match, most of the results ended up a game out with the one-sided affairs, with the exception of the Seoul Dynasty, who really impressed me with their dominant 4-0 sweep of their opponent, the Atlanta Reign, who I had anticipated would take at least a couple of maps. Looking ahead to today's fixtures, we hopefully are in for a great day of competitive entertainment. This week's game of the week is a banger, as the knockdown San Francisco Shock play the sky-high Seoul Dynasty. This is the ultimate test for both teams to see where they stand in the overall balance of power, and whilst the Shock will be desperate to respond after their awful upset defeat to Houston, I just think the Triple DVS and Sombra Goats comps we know can be created from Seoul's 12-man roster, given the slight edge, so I'm going 3-2 Dynasty. The Florida Mayhem then take on the Paris Eternal in what should be at least a 3-1 victory for Paris, before what I think is quite an interesting affair that pits the Philadelphia Fusion and the Boston Uprising, and just based on their last matches, I think Philly should be the 3-1 winners. Lastly, the week concludes with a pretty uninspired ending, as Washington Justice should be 4-0'd by the LA Gladiators. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching my Stage 3, Week 2, Days 2 and 3 review. As usual, I'll be back tomorrow with Sunday's review, before my power rankings on Tuesday, and my Q&A on Wednesday. So if you enjoyed and don't want to miss out, please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter for this continuing Overwatch League coverage and content, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.